to Live from Dorimare.
Today's hot topic is fairy fruit.
Very juicy topic right now.
As you all may know, fairy fruit has been a very controversial topic lately, as there have been problems in the government, public, and surrounding communities of Dorimare because of this fairy fruit. Our beloved Mayor, Nat Chanticleer, has been what some may consider a limp governor of our very, highly structured society. And
I don't want to be the one to say it, but something's off about him to me. There's just a look in his eyes. Sometimes it just really throws me. I'm not really sure what he's doing and what he's doing about this situation specifically.
I've always had my doubts about how sure-footed he was as both a man and a leader of our government. But this whole epidemic, as I'm going to go ahead and call it, has really shown his true colors, that he really has less of a grasp on this situation than we ever could have thought. If we take a look at the history of the government of Dorimare, we know that there was the quite infamous, and possibly famous to some, Duke Aubrey, who back in the day was known for doing some quite unruly things to both the members of his council and to members of the community. And as we all may remember, we have the day once a year where we remember the revolution of the brave men that fought to bring justice to this country and to overthrow the really corrupt government that once had a firm grasp on the people of Dorimare. But it makes you wonder what repercussions there may have been because of this, long-standing mystery that is often associated with the Duke of Aubrey. Because as we know, he was never caught, he was never killed, and many speculate that he went to go live the remainder of his life and perhaps still lives in fairyland. But on the topic of fairy fruit, what do you think of it? Do you believe in it? Do you think that people really have the capacity to go insane or, be exposed to it, even though we've tried so hard to just, not even mention the word fairy fruit for so long?
I think that there's an outside source. I don't believe it's fairies. I won't even think about it. I don't think it could ever happen.
I hear you, but don't you think that it's odd that there have been so many cases of these people just all of the sudden going mad, running off into the hills? I mean, we have the horrible incident of what happened at the school with the crabapple blossoms. I mean, an entire school of girls just disappeared into the hills after we found traces of some unidentified juices and, reports of certain individuals that people didn't recognize coming into the school. Don't you think that's all very strange?
I mean, when I went to school, I also would love to have run away. Maybe the kids are just using it as an excuse. They hear stories, and I think that's what the biggest problem is. If there is no fairy fruit, they're going to start thinking that there is fairy fruit.
Yeah. But I did hear an eyewitness report that Ambrose Honeysuckle, who, as you know, his daughter Moonlove Honeysuckle really brought this problem into light.
Yes.
When she caused a big, rouse and ran off into the hills in a very kind of unnatural way. So he says, and, there have been a couple different theories about this, but he says that he saw someone who he believes very much looks like Duke Aubrey at the school right after the incident with his daughter occurred. So don't you think that is a little bit of too much of a coincidence? I feel like there are so many things involved that it's hard to just kind of shove it off into the box of, no, the girls are just going crazy or girls will be girls.
That changes my opinion a little bit.
I mean, I think that we can speculate as much as we like, but we're not really down there in the middle of it, experiencing what it's like to be with these families, to really see firsthand what it's like to have the effects of whatever this may be, whether or not it's fairy fruit, whether or not it's, some other kind of hysteria. So I think it'd be really valuable if we brought in an outside perspective.
I think that would be a great idea.
I can invite our next guest, which is someone who is very close with the community. He's been at the forefront of all of this as the best physician in the country of dorimare. I think he's seen firsthand some of the symptoms of whatever this might be.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that you'll all help me in welcoming Endymion Lear.
Welcome back. Here we have Endymion Lear, and he's going to talk to us today about all the stuff that's going on. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well.
Good to hear it.
I'm very glad that you're on the show today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Endymion Lear. I'm a physician. I've been practicing in Lud in the Mist and surrounding areas for about 30 years. Besides being a physician, I'm also somewhat of a historian. I have my fair share of opinions about some of the senators and government in this country. But to address your question, I am someone who is pretty up close and personal with a lot of the things that are going on. And, I think that it's something that needs to be addressed. And something that maybe is not being addressed by our government at this time.
Very, very good point. What are your opinions on these allegations against Ranulf and Moonlove? Do you have any thoughts about?
Do I have any thoughts about it? Yes, I do. Actually, I think that, I went and I visited Ranulf initially.
You did?
I think that was one of the first instances of this kind of psychosis that I think has been happening.
So, psychosis. So.
You mean, do I think it's what should not be named? I think that there's a lot of speculation, but in my professional opinion, I think that there is a much more reasonable explanation for all of this.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but I went and saw Ranulf, and I think that, I think that he's suffering from something that's more of a condition of life. Kind of like an illness of life. I mean, have you met his father?
Well, speaking of his father, I know that you and Mayor Chantelier have had a tumultuous past. So what are your opinions on what he's doing right now for this country?
What is he doing? It's more like, what isn't he doing? I think that, it's quite obvious that he tried to kind of brush whatever happened to his son under the rug. And, I think there's a lot of people in the Senate who are tending to agree with me, even though I don't always agree with them. I think something else could be said about, for example, Ambrose Honeysuckle.
Mm-hmm.
I know his daughter was met with a certain affliction, but I think we just know that sometimes, girls can be girls, and, it's hard to say exactly what's wrong with her.
Very interesting. I appreciate your outspoken opinion on all of this, and it's always good to have a physician's input.
I think that it's something that, we shouldn't just jump to conclusions about things, and I think that, whether or not it's a certain mental condition or if it's a certain something that we don't really speak about, it's just a matter of everyone being on the same page and a matter of people in the Senate kind of, taking action and realizing that maybe the person that they've elected to be in charge is not exactly as capable as one might think.
So, do you think that the country shouldn't be in a panic right now? Do you think that is there anything to worry about? And
No, I think that everything will work out in the end. I wouldn't be surprised if these girls just came marching back into the city tomorrow, if they've crossed the border, then it's like, it is what it is, I suppose, but,
They're children. What really can be said? Sometimes people can be a little off.
Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show and talking to us about your opinions on all of this. We love having outside opinions, especially people who are so involved in the situation. I mean, we are just speaking for the public, but to get a good additional view is always important.
Yeah, and I think that it pays to listen to your people who understand these conditions and, you know, are really trained in what they do, such as myself, as I'm a very trained physician. But before I go, let me just say one thing. Life and death, life and death. They are the dyes in which I work. Let me ask you, are my hands stained?
Stay tuned for more.
Welcome back to Live from Dorimare. I think that was a really interesting perspective that we got from Endymion Lear. I think that, you know, it's really important to listen to people who are really kind of in the midst of things and might have a better understanding of what's going on.
It really did open my eyes to a new perspective, and I was really happy to talk to him.
It's interesting that he really kind of discredited the idea of fairy fruit and really, from a medical standpoint, didn't believe that something could really do this, you know, and it's just fascinating that he kind of doesn't really believe that fairy fruit is really involved, even though I think there's a lot of people out there that would disagree with him, especially those close to those that are actually being affected by this.
We are actually getting a call right now from one of our sister networks on Swan on the Dapple. We have Elliot here, and he's going to give us his interesting perspective on this whole situation. Elliot?
Alright, so in the town of Blood in the Mist, everything having to do with fairies is taboo. Fairy land, fairy fruit, just everything. And hence, they try not to talk about it directly. They always refer to it as the land beyond the hills, or woven silk, or any number of other things. Sometimes they're just oh, you know that thing we don't talk about? But still, they're talking about it a lot. Most of the time it's not directly, but a lot of times they straight up just do talk about it. Everyone who lives in the town of Blood in the Mist is trying very, very hard to always be civilized and courteous and do everything that civilization entails. And fairyland for them represents kind of everything that is chaotic or weird or silly or absurd or basically anything that would actively go against, kind of civilization and the status quo. And they're trying to kind of force that down through their suppression of fairyland, but at the same time, the kind of cultural trappings, the kind of remnants of fairyland are everywhere in Blood of the Mist. It seeps into their culture, their way of lives, the way they decorate their houses. It's everywhere. They can't get rid of it as much as they can. They can't isolate this one part of themselves they don't like away from the rest of it, just like they can't remove themselves from the fact that they live literally geographically next to fairyland. They keep on trying to avoid this and avoid talking about it and hope that they'll kind of make it go away, out of sight, out of mind, but it fails spectacularly in every possible instance just because you can't get rid of that. And I think that reflects itself in the human psyche. Everyone wants to kind of only pay attention to the good things, the kind of oh, right and wrong, sense of morality, very proper and stood up. But that dirty underbelly is still there too. The kind of animal aspects of humanity, they're always there, and everyone kind of is looking to not focus on them, but they're still there, and they're always going to be there. Better to kind of, acknowledge them and so better solve the problem than just try and ignore them forever. This has been my analysis of the news events. Back to you.
Thank you, Elliot. That was enlightening. I think that this whole thing, though, it really makes me wonder, at least, what is the future of Dorimare?
And will we figure out what is happening?
In an attempt to mitigate some of the complaints, Mayor Chanticleer has clearly tried to step up the enforcement of preventing fairy fruit from entering Blood in the Mist, but it clearly doesn't seem to be working as well as he might hope.
My biggest concern about all of this is how hush-hush the situation is. People have been so afraid to even mutter the word fairy fruit. There's a stigma around it, and if we're not talking about it, how can we ever face the problem?
A lot of people, are so quick to kind of discredit the idea that there might be some fairy involvement or that even fairies exist. And if we do that, and if we don't even have those serious conversations, then really how can we come to any sort of resolution or explanation for everything that's gone on?
We have to start learning from the mistakes of our past and what has happened before us in order to make a better future.
The last thing I think any of us wants is another revolution.
It's up to us as a public to all come together and at least have an open mind.
It really makes us wonder, what really is the root of this problem? Is it the fairies? Is it the fairy fruit? Or is it our public view that things, topics, creatures should be repressed to the point in which people are stigmatized because of any sort of involvement with it?
That's all for this episode.
Thanks for watching.
Does life got you down? Are you starting to feel pathetic, boring, and human? Well, worry no more. Introducing Fairy Fruit.